Welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool, and in today's show we will be taking a look at three important stories. First of all, we will be of course starting with a very important announcement that has been made by Prime Minister Imran Khan regarding a welfare relief package for the masses, which is amounting to 120 billion rupees. And under this package, 30% lower prices will be given for specific food items to a number of eligible families who will be able to purchase the likes of ghee, flour and of course pulses as well on relatively lower prices. 30% subsidy will be given to these eligible families, and this is a big welfare package coming from the PTI government, of course, since the inflation hit prices of different essential commodities is really putting a burden on the masses. Along with that, other important announcements were also made, considering the fact that petrol prices will continue to increase. The Prime Minister also said there will be a gas problem in the winters that the Pakistanis will be facing. He of course also talked about how important it is for these prices to come down, and the fact that he will be halving the prices of all of the food items if the two big families of the political families of the country who've looted the money will give back half of the money that they've looted. Of course, this is in line with the government's anti-government corruption agenda that it has been talking about for a long time. But of course, the relief package continues to provide some sort of relief to the masses, and hopefully we'll be able to see some change for the really poverty-stricken people of Pakistan and getting some benefit from this package. We'll discuss this in further detail in the show. We'll also be looking at the situation in India. In the recent news, we've of course touched upon the Indian policies against minorities, especially Muslims in India. But of course, we've also seen that this crackdown is not limited to just the common people of India, but also is now beginning to affect some of the most powerful Muslims of India, of course, including the superstar Shah Rukh Khan and his son as well, who recently saw engaged in a dubious drug bust. And of course, this is in line with many other such instances where Muslim role models have been put down by the ruling BJP party, because of course in a world order that they are trying to put forward, where Hindu first, no Muslim role models can actually come forward. And this particular act of putting down the identities of Muslims related to any field, not just the common people or political parties, but also to fashion or sports or art, is something that actually increases and deepens the question of to what extent the Modi regime is going to go ahead on its crackdown against minorities and Muslims, and how far they still have to go on this. We'll also be looking at the amendment that has been made in the NAP ordinance. This is the third time that it has been done so. And because of this change, what happens now is that instead of the Supreme Judicial Council, the NAB, the executive body, can be changed, and that power is now given to the president, which of course puts question on the accountability of this watchdog itself, a body which has undergone many controversy in the past, whose accountability and trust is still questionable in the larger public, and whether or not this actually furthers the sentiment of the nation is really something that the government needs to consider. And we'll have a discussion on how is this going to be ensured when there is of course this fight against corruption and this emphasis on accountability, whether such actions undermine those or are going to strengthen such institutions. At the end, we'll also be taking a look at the Festival of Lights, Diwali, which is going to be celebrated tomorrow, and of course our government's efforts to uphold the rights of minorities, and also making sure that harmony is what's important and that all evil must be fought against. Of course, to discuss on all of these points, we have been joined in the studios by our two esteemed analysts, Mr. Farooq Patafi and Mr. Raja Faisal. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, so considering the first topic that we have, of course, is the Prime Minister's important welfare package, something which is music to ears to a lot of people who are obviously suffering from the high inflation and, of course, rising prices of essential commodities. Many people within the country will be able to benefit from such a scheme. First of all, let's take a look at this in a more broader way as to how big of an announcement this is. Mr. Faisal.
Well, Sana, it was unprecedented and it was expected from Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan. Since the day he took the office, the premier office, he was up to it that he wanted to change the lives of people. But unfortunately, and today in his speech he has mentioned this, that unfortunately the whole world, it saw COVID-19, and due to that COVID-19, Pakistan's economy was hit as well, same as other countries, regional as well as the world countries. So I think it is late, but it's never late. And 53% of the population of Pakistan is going to be benefiting from this program. And I think the two departments, I must say, first of all, NADRA and SAS program, they have played a key role in it, and everyone must hail the services of both of them. Plus, the idea of facilitating people, it itself is unprecedented, and I think government is doing fantastic in it.
Right, of course, the welfare package, of course, talks about 120 billion rupees, which is a big announcement coming from the PTI government. But how is that going to be trickled down and distributed among the different families and individuals is a question that remains. Farooq, your comments?
Right. I think at this moment it is great that the Prime Minister of Pakistan knows that the people of Pakistan are suffering, and he has come up with this solution. Remember, today's speech can be divided into three distinct parts. One, he explained why there is inflation, right? You can nitpick, you can argue with that explanation. There is no doubt that there is food inflation all over the world, and it is affecting countries, not only Pakistan. He also gave you a comparative analysis of what is going on with other countries, for example, India, various others, and we have heard the cabinet ministers also coming up with various explanations in the past 2 days. That was one thing. The second thing, and I believe that bigger than this announcement, was a good news that might be a lead that is buried in the story, and we are talking about one crucial thing: data. When I joined this organization some 7 years ago, I remember the biggest problem the government of Pakistan used to have was data. It did not know how many of citizens it had. I'm talking about a country without census for 20 years. So I'm really glad that at this moment, thanks to a SAS program, we have been able to generate the kind of data that is needed to assure and to ensure that you have, where the most vulnerable parts of the society are. That's how you actually target those areas or those people, and then, then you provide the solutions. The third thing, of course, is when you talk about his speech and this package, of course, it is going to be quite a relief. But there are umpteen compounding factors. One of them is, of course, the government of Pakistan now knows where the entire population is and where it can target the most vulnerable. But on the other side, when it comes to the execution part, there you have a problem, because you have one pipeline, utility stores. You don't have many other ways to actually ensure that the subsidy only passes to the most vulnerable or the targeted people. So we'll have to perhaps look at that as well. But in coming days, the numbers, as he also pointed out, Faisal, about 20 million families or family units, and then 130 million citizens. If the relief reaches them, it could be great. Regarding a couple of other things, macroeconomic stabilization and international connectivity are also very important, right? At this moment, we still are struggling with the economic stabilization, macroeconomic stabilization, and that also compounds the prices of inputs, because dollar kept on rising for quite some time.
Right.
Let us hope in coming days we are able to manage that as well.
One very short comment I wanted to make. I certainly agree with Farokh when he said that only utility stores are available. But I just wanted to add the way the government of Pakistan, it is introducing in the health system that the private hospitals, they can be included into the health system as well. So in that way, why not including the private stores and private shops?
You're talking about ration cards?
Exactly.
Also, another thing, of course,
Yes.
the fact that the cash disbursement program by the SAS program was relatively smooth, and the
It was.
operationalization of such programs is something that the government is now getting sort of hand
Yeah.
on. So maybe, yes,
Do you want to, will you allow me to come in here?
of course.
Regarding money is easily transferred, right? Because you need to have an account where you can transfer the money. But when you talk about food items and this idea of ration cards or some kind of utility card, that is also important, because then there is a problem of people exploiting the system. There are loopholes, and the private sector can actually stop a lot of things. So we'll have to actually look at how the local grassroots level actually works with it.
Right. Before we end this topic and move on to the next one, my last and brief question to you, Faisal, would be, do you think this is the best the government could have done, or more or less?
I think looking at the current situations of Pakistan, plus especially the economic situation of Pakistan, this thing right now at this time, bringing this initiative, I think there is nothing better than this, because right now people are suffering on ground, and I think we have a government that
Right.
knows that people are suffering, and government is doing every bit possible.
Right. Well, it is a welcome step, of course, and we continue to welcome such steps by the PTI government. Of course, we need to help the larger population, and of course, they are suffering from the high rise in prices of essential commodities. Moving on now, of course, to the situation in India and the way the minorities, especially Muslims, are being treated. It is no surprise now to the world anymore. It's quite obvious as to what is going on within India and what sort of a policy is being followed by Modi's regime. But we've also seen now that many big names in the country are also not safe from this agenda. Before we take a look at this in detail, let's first watch this report prepared by our desk.
Even though India's Muslim population is significantly larger in number than Pakistan, it is numerically a minority in the Hindu-dominated society. Due to India's caste-based societal system, minorities have always been exploited and denied basic human rights. Falsifying India's claim of secular and tolerant state, Narendra Modi's rise to power indicates the inherent hate for so-called outsiders. This hate is now being sponsored by the state and seen in the form of mob lynching, sexual abuse and attacks. The drama surrounding the arrest of Shah Rukh Khan's son has been termed by many as a way sending message to the Muslim populace that even the most influential people can be targeted. The BJP-RSS nexus is becoming dangerous day by day. At the rate of their fascist activities are increasing, it seems highly likely that we might see Nazi Germany-style regime in India.
Well, we have seen what is going on in India in the recent past. We've seen how it has acted against Muslims and other minorities. And now, of course, the scandal regarding Shah Rukh Khan's son, and of course other big names in the Indian media industry, and crackdown on other small efforts towards bringing forward Muslim role models in fashion, arts or sports. We've seen in the aftermath of the T20 World Cup match also how a Muslim cricketer in the Indian team was targeted and called a traitor, and such instances have been going on in the past many times before, pointing towards the fact that perhaps India is no longer safe even for the most powerful Muslims of the country. We'll talk in further detail on this. For this discussion, we've also been joined by Rohit Sharma, who's an Indian journalist. Thank you very much for joining us. And we've also been joined by Hamid Khan, a senior analyst. First of all, I will go to Rohit Sharma and talk about the fact that the recent actions that we have seen in India, both in the recent past and since Modi regime has come to power, point towards this bias towards the Hindu first order that the BJP government seems to be putting forward. There has been, of course, many gruesome acts of terror against Muslims all over India. But now we've also seen that there is another sort of war against the big names of India, and it sort of points towards the fact that maybe any identity or anything positive associated with a Muslim person within India is trying to be curtailed, and whether that person actually brings in a good cultural asset or a powerful asset to the country is not of much importance to the Indian government. What's more important is the identity or the faith of the person. Correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Yeah, ma'am. Exactly, you are wrong, frankly speaking. When the son of Shah Rukh Khan was arrested, 7 more persons were arrested. All of them Hindus, right? And everybody did not get bail. So you people, like in Pakistan, they see everything with the text of Islam. The fact is that nobody got bail. Shah Rukh Khan's son did not get bail. The rest of the Hindus also did not get bail. Firstly. Secondly, after Modi came, the biggest hits in Bollywood were given by these Muslim superstars. To name a few, Tube Light for Shah Rukh Khan and Raees. Okay, now coming to Amir Khan. PK, the biggest hit in Bollywood was given in Modi regime. Forget about Dangal, right? And if I talk about Salman Khan, then Tube Light, Tiger Zinda Hai, Rape Street, all these were given by Muslims, right? Modi regime is here, of course, whatever said and done, but Modi regime has never differentiated between Muslims and Hindus. And all these three, can you please give me a certificate that after Modi came to power, India became a communal country? Before that, India wasn't? So please look at your channels or your medias. Other reports that Muslims are being persecuted even before Modi came to power. And these Muslim superstars became superstars during that regime. And in India, we had 4 presidents.
I absolutely disagree with Rohit.
You have a right to.
To the fact. I've gotten your point, but the fact remains that, you know, it's quite surprising that there are so many coincidences occurring one after the other, and to not have a correlation to them is quite questionable. It's not just the arrest of Aryan Khan, it's also related to the crackdown against any such instance. For example, Amir Khan's recent addition in an advertisement, Indian models who were also part of another advertisement who did not have a bindi on, with no bindi, no business hashtag, that got circulated. We also saw a protest against Urdu being called a Muslim language when actually its origin lies in northern India. Then we've also seen the acts of calling a traitor to Mohammad Shami, a really good cricketer on the Indian side, just because of a loss of a match. We have seen blatant hate speeches coming on from different political ministers from BJP. We've also seen the fact that 4 farmers were marked down by an SUV of the son of one of Modi's ministers, yet all of the headlines were focusing on something completely else, while this man is still in the cabinet. I'd like to take Hamid Khan in this debate as well and include him in the discussion. Sir, how would you look at the situation that's going on in India? I mean, it's not just one front. There's so many different fronts against which the Modi regime is acting on. How is this that the Indian side still finds it easy to refute them?
Thank you very much. I mean, I absolutely disagree with Rohit, and I acknowledge his knowledge of Bollywood movies, but the thing is, we are not talking about the movies, we are talking about the Modi's fascist regime, what atrocities they are doing against the Muslims and minorities. I mean, can you imagine the low level of tolerance in India that what's his name, Virat Kohli gave one statement in favor of Shami, Muhammad Shami, of his own team, his own mate, and his daughter, who is 11 months old, has been threatened to be raped because of that. He has given just one statement in favor of a Muslim. This is the tolerance level of India, government, because of the RSS ideology, because of the BJP Hindutva ideology. There is one more. We have seen so many examples when it comes to the Muslims. and they have been treated badly. Now I'll give one example very clear, that in 2018 they wanted Shah Rukh Khan to support BJP's election campaign, and he kept himself aside, and now this is the punishment of him not being supporting to BJP. And this is very clear that, I mean, why Aryan Khan was arrested. There was, I mean, I have studied many examples in the world, even in England, even in Europe. There was no question to keep him detained for so many days, which it is against all the laws. And that's what I am saying on all the international platforms, that it is when injustice is delivered by the justice with the support of the government and the state, this is when a country becomes hostile. This is when the situation is very serious, that the Indian government have made their own judiciary puppet for them to work against the Muslims, because judiciary was the last hope for the Muslims in India. And we have seen what they did in Aryan's case, what they did in Babri Masjid Ayodhya's case, what they did in Kashmir's 370 and 35A revocation of article case. So we have seen that the Indian, not only the army is become politicized, Indian judiciary has been exposed. So now the public is not secular anymore. Unfortunately, Indian tag of being secular country is finished. Now it is a country who has no tolerance for the minorities, and especially targeting Muslims and then Sikhs. I mean, there is two things very lastly I would like to say. One, if somebody is not in favor of Indian RSS ideology, I'm not talking about being Hindu or non-Hindu. At the moment, if somebody is not supporting Rashtriya Sevak Sangat, he is called as traitor. If somebody is not supporting ideology of BJP, that let's follow the ideology of Chanakya ideology, he is called traitor. I mean, this is going to be very dangerous for its own existence. India is going to be divided into many countries because of the fascist behavior of Narendra Modi.
Right, and of course, let it be clear that it's not just about the case of Shah Rukh Khan and his son. That's just one small example of what has been going on in India and what continues to happen within the country. I mean, we have names of cities being changed just to emphasize on the fact that this is a Hindu-first country, and that's what's more important. So this nationalist agenda is now seeping in so much within the country that it's becoming quite obvious. Faisal, your thoughts on that?
Well, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you very much, Rohit, for joining us. And Rohit is a journalist from India, a very reliable one. But I just wanted to highlight a few facts for him. I hope he understands them better than I say. That India is such a country where 1,300,000,000 population. Out of that, the 543 out of the members of 543 in Lok Sabha, 303 members of BJP, and not a single Muslim is present there for the BJP. Why? Because BJP's politics, it revolves around anti-welfare slogans. They have a politics that revolves around anti-Muslim or anti-Islam and anti-minority slogans and narratives, and that's how they get the votes. And we have seen in past that the same person who is Prime Minister of India today, not us, we didn't call him, but the West called him Butcher of Gujarat. Why? Because everyone knows what happened in Gujarat. And then right now, if we look at Tirupura, in Tirupura, 17 mosques, they were vandalized, few of them, they were torched, and lots of Muslims, they are facing terrorism at the hands of Bajrang Dal, at the hands of RSS. And these are the things which are making us, if not the Indians, which are making us feel that today's India is not secular, it's actually Hindutva ideology run India.
And not just that, that the freedom of expression seems to be curbed to an extent where you can't even celebrate the victory of another country's match without being called as somebody who's spreading hate or spreading, extremist thoughts in the country. And that really puts a question mark whether or not India is a safe place for not just minorities, but for anybody who would like to come there. Farooq, how about you?
Right. While I was listening to our esteemed guest from India, I was just thinking that denial is not a river in India, right? Regarding what was said, Amit Shah, India's Home Minister, says, "Aap chronology samjhiye, understand chronology." I'm going to request you to understand methodology. And then you have to apply a test also. It is said, and there's a duck test, which is a form of abductive reasoning. It says that if something looks like a duck, it quacks and swims like a duck, maybe it is a duck, right? Now look at Narendra Modi and his policies. This is a gentleman who was not Gujarat's elected chief minister when Godhra happened, when Gujarat violence happened. After that, he repeatedly got elected and got so popular that now he is India's prime minister. After that, if you are talking about methodology, there is a very clear methodology when it comes to BJP's politics. It is called shock and awe policy. They attack, they maim or kill the minorities, and then appeal to the majoritarianism and get further votes. And that has been happening repeatedly from Babri's demolition to this day. But just to understand what is the chronology, let me give you examples of this government at this time in the past 7-8 years. NRC in Assam, where 2 million people were declared non-nationals, most of them Muslims. Then came CAA, which allowed people from other countries, their minorities but not Muslims, to be included in India so that there can be a demographic shift. Then, of course, we know about Article 370 and 35A. Then love jihad laws. For quite some time we were told that India's secularism actually believes in intercommunal marriages, and now it is being outlawed and it is being declared as some kind of propaganda method to erode the majority, right? Then beef laws and cow vigilantes. Who actually bears the brunt of that? It is again the minorities. Then Ayodhya verdict. If you read that document, and I've been covering judiciaries not only in this country, elsewhere as well, you read that and you cry because one feels that all those people who were involved were given a reprieve. And finally, when you talk about riots, why actually stop at that with Gujarat violence? Then of course we have seen what has happened in Delhi. So there is this very consistent program that has been going on in India under Narendra Modi's government. They have actually marginalized the minorities. Unfortunately, they have marginalized media as well. While sitting in such a cauldron, it must be really difficult to disagree with the government. And my heart goes out to the Indian media who is battling on still. But at this moment, when you talk about institutions, they have collapsed. Minorities are literally crying out loud because they are being crushed every single day.
Rohit, I'm sure there's some sort of an explanation for all these actions. Care to enlighten us?
Now, I won't give any explanations. I'll give you the facts. This gentleman who said, and warm welcome to Raja Faisal, wonderful friend. And also we share the same hairstyle, so I like him a lot. Now, coming back to the point, you said minister's son mowed down people, were they Muslim? I don't think anybody was Muslim. Secondly, Muhammad Shami was called. You're talking to a country where Muhammad Azharuddin was the captain of the team for 10 years. You didn't mention that. Now, coming to
prior to Modi's time.
Yeah. Then coming to Shah Rukh Khan, that he was forced to support BJP. Salman supported. What's the problem? Salman was fine, right? Correct? Nobody said anything. Why? He was a Hindu. Now coming to Indian judiciary, my friend my friend said that Indian judiciary is also biased. Who exonerated Salman Khan, a Hindu? I think he's a Hindu. Where he was exonerated in 2 cases, right? And who gave bail to and who exonerated Shah Rukh Khan himself in that kerosene hoarding case? That was again Indian judiciary. Now coming to Muslims, there are no Muslim members in BJP. Madam, they have Muslim ministers in the current cabinet, in the previous cabinet, Modi's cabinet. They have Muslim members. they have Muslim MPs. Now, you said one more thing, that somebody supporting Pakistan has been booked. So let me take you back to 2017, where one person known as Umar Daraz was jailed for 10 years for supporting Kohli in Pakistan. Why did that happen? Why don't you read that news? You're just blaming India and India and India. Now, India is a secular country, and we have had Indian presidents, we have had ministers, we have had chief justices, we have had so many governors and chief ministers who were Muslims. So please do not blame us. We have been secular and we are still secular.
Well, your actions seem otherwise. What you say is not enough, perhaps, to just be secular. It is required for you to act secular as well. Let's bring Hamid Khan in the discussion. Yes, Mr. Hamid, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when Rohit is mentioning all that facts, all these facts are prior to Modi's time, first of all. I mean, India was secular, Azharuddin was captain, I agree. But at the same time, what Indian actors are saying right now, Nasiruddin Shah, what he said, that this is the first time of his life that he is repenting living in India. What happened to Shabana Azmi and Javed Akhtar? And what happened to others? And then let me remind you what Amir Khan said as well, that he feels insecure and he was almost forced to leave India forever. You are talking about one side. You are not understanding that there are over 250 million Muslims that are living, and now they have to prove their loyalty every time, every day, every morning to the Indian government by calling their slogans and other things. This has never happened before. They were free, at least there was a limit when they were allowed to have their own rituals, they were allowed to have their own celebrations. But for the last 8 years, this is the first time in the history of India, this is the first, go and check the fact that Indian Hindu population is increasing, while for the last 67 years, Hindu population was decreasing. Why? Because of this Ghar Wapsi forcefully program and other programs. I mean, I fully agree with Pitafi Sahab that this is not an ideology. This is a methodology, and this is a complete planned methodology which they are implementing for the last 8 years, and they are trying to not only to change the demographics of the certain areas, they are also trying to follow the principles where there will be no place for any other religion in the country. And Rohit, when he talks about the system and the 7 Hindus were arrested and others, can he mention 7 Hindus' names? No, it is the difference between the star and the sun involving the sun and involving a civilian. There is a complete sense of revenge when it comes to the case of Shah Rukh Khan. There is a complete sense of oppressing the Muslims when it comes to the cases against Muslims. There is a complete proof of the cases. Tripura is a classic example. Last week, what happened in Tripura is, there is no explanation for it. I mean, how can you demolish, vandalize the mosque and do the lynching and everything? And I read a New York report that has never happened, that the head of the state is kind of supporting a mob lynching to the Muslims, and this is what exactly started happening after 2014, 2015. So if Rohit, I agree again with Afisa that Rohit has no choice but to defend his country, because he is one of those who is living in there. I mean, I feel pity for those people who have to defend something which is it cannot be defended. But I agree one thing, that if they will keep defending India falsely, then there are few voices who are trying to make sense, who have been made quiet, like Barkhadat, Kuldeep Nair, what was his name, and other voices, Shashi Tharoor and others, and what they doing the propaganda against. I mean, there in India, the propaganda against Gandhi is unbelievable. They are trying to portray, in supporting the Hindu ideology, they are trying to undermine the Gandhi's contribution for India as well. So this is what India is doing.
Absolutely. I'd like to extend the liberty to Rohit Sharma for having the last word, since you're our guest. So your chance to say whatever you want to.
I will get that chance on Indian channel.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. So, I'll try my level best to get you the chance. Now, I will certainly thank him a lot that he said India was secular earlier. Then this thing fails the entire motive of Pakistan being the state. If India was secular and every Muslim was happy, why Pakistan became a country? Secondly, he said Muslims are being targeted. In the Modi regime, when the Prime Minister was Modi, 2 Pakistani Muslims have been given. In fact, many more, but 2 prominent Pakistani Muslims have been given Indian nationality. Firstly, Adnan Sami. Secondly, Salma Aga. Why? If he is against Muslims, okay. And why those Muslims?
You use them for your purpose. You use them.
Sir, when you were speaking, I was sorry. Then now, why those Pakistani Muslims and many more? Why those Pakistani Muslims became an Indian citizen? Now, what happened to Nasiruddin Shah and Shabana Azmi? Nasiruddin Shah's brother was the Vice Chief of Indian Army. How did he become the Vice Chief of Indian Army? Shabana Azmi and her husband, both of them were members of Indian Parliament, and that too nominated. No Hindu couple has that privilege. Now, coming to Hindu population, two more points. Hindu population is increasing. At the time of independence, Muslim population was 7%, today is 15%. Now, he said demography is changing, sorry for that. Muslims are increasing, even after that much atrocity, if Muslims are increasing, then I would love everybody to have atrocity, because Hindus are decreasing in Pakistan.
I mean, this is sad, Sana, that we had to actually mention population control and all. This is a Hindutva talking point, that Muslim population has been increasing in India. India's own population has been increasing by leaps and bounds. Nobody talks about that. And secondly, about the idea of Pakistan, sir, I didn't speak earlier. Idea of Pakistan, I don't know why India keeps on renegotiating and relitigating 1947. Pakistan is a reality today, whether India was a secular country or not. Pakistan is a reality, and you have to start.
Two-nation theory is the best thing for the subcontinent.
And of course, we cannot mention just one-offs and defend the kind of ideology that is being propagated in India. What's more important is that this is something that is evident in all of the actions that the Modi regime has been taking. Whether or not you can quote examples to prove the fact that you're a secular or not, it is very apparent to the world and to us what is going on in India, and especially to the minorities and the Muslims who are suffering at the hands of the regime. We'll move on to our third topic of the debate, which is of course the change in the NAB ordinance, the amendment that has been made for a third time, which basically means that the power of removing the NAB chairman is now in the hands of the President and not the Supreme Judicial Council, which of course puts question marks on the accountability and transparency of the watchdog itself, whether or not that can actually be ensured by the government when such an amendment is in place. This of course means that there is going to be a lot of hue and cry from the opposition, but what we need to keep in mind, of course, is that the strengthening of the institution is of utmost importance. Is that being achieved or not? That is the real question here. Faisal, I would like to ask you this question. Considering the fact that the government has taken this step and its claims of working towards anti-corruption, more accountability, strengthening the institutions, is this in line with the stance?
Sana, the very first point that actually brought this government into the Premier's house was the accountability. And Prime Minister Imran Khan, he was the biggest advocate of accountability in the political atmosphere of Pakistan.
Right.
And when we talk about accountability, of course, right now, his own supporters and public at large, they want the accountability to be done, and over the social media, and there are certain voices that want the accountability to be done, and the process of the accountability must be rapid. Probably this is why that NAB, the changes that are seeing in the NAB, I think this is the only why the powers are going to the President of Pakistan rather than Supreme Judicial Council. And now people can simply say that now the power is there to do the accountability. So that's how I see it.
But of course, the most important point regarding NAB or such institutions is the fact that whether or not the nation puts their trust in them or not, are they confident that this watchdog actually does its job? Yeah. Does this not put this watchdog into more controversy than it already was in Farouk?
Right, you are talking about the president's power to remove the chairman NAB,
Right.
right? Frankly, you have to first ask her which kind of body is NAB. Is it a judicial body? If it is not a judicial body, why should its leader be decided or removed by Supreme Judicial Council? It is an executive body, so naturally we forget that president's office is not partisan. It is head of the state's office. So the president technically is head of every institution in the country, right? And that's why the president, if he is given this power, it is not a bad news, it is a good news. But I would have actually liked, and let us call out those who are actually responsible for these circumstances. If the Parliament of Pakistan was functioning properly, was doing its job in the past 3 years, then it could have made laws. Perhaps we could have a body which could have actually been held responsible for making such changes. It was not done. The second thing is the main opposition parties who actually have created this deadlock in the parliament, and yet they keep on complaining about NAB as well. Let me remind you that before this party ever came close to power, these two parties created an alliance. It was called ARD, and then they signed a document called COD, Charter of Democracy, in which they promised that they are going to replace NAB with another body. For 10 years they were in power, they never changed it. And today they are the victims, and they are the reasons also of blocking everything. So at this moment, I don't begrudge the government to come up with this ordinance. And regarding this ordinance, let me also tell you, people keep on saying this ordinance is illegal or some extra constitutional. With due respect, when 18th Amendment was being written, at that time they had the opportunity to do away with the articles relating to ordinances. They never did that.
Right.
And today they are calling it
bring in
whatever they
to the discussion Mr. Arif Chaudhary, who is a legal expert. He's joined us online. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Considering the recent amendment in the NAB ordinance, it's the third time the government has done so. How do you see the move overall? Do you think that it points towards a sort of confusion on the government side? Do you think that it questions the accountability that the watchdog is expected to show? Does that mean that the government is not going to be transparent in its actions? What sort of a take do you form an opinion considering this move?
3 successive amendments within such a short span of time speaks volumes about the competence of the team who is responsible for all this. I do not agree with my friend Patafi that, there's no harm, giving this power to the president, the removal of the chairman. Actually, the reason for not giving this power to, the government, because, by this, it means that you are going to give this power to the Prime Minister, because President doesn't act at his own. It is the Prime Minister who gives him advice for anything. That is the constitutional prerogative of the Prime Minister.